you guys have talked about rhythm quite a bit, and I think that rhythm is usually determined by identity. I know that we've talked a lot about your coaching past and your priorities when you were a coach versus now being a teacher, how much better of a teacher you are because of that. But I really think that identity piece within all of us is that drive that we figure out, what am I in the classroom? What am I to the students? What am I to myself? What am I to my spouse? And I think that that's what drives us professionally. It's just trying to figure out who we really are. Because I coached for a while and I was in the same mold. To me, coaching soccer was much more important than comparative religion. Mm-hmm. I love the class. I've had many kids who have come back and were like, oh, that was my favorite class. And I love that. But my heart wasn't there. My heart was in soccer. So now that I've done what I've done outside of coaching, I kind of want to get back into coaching, but it's not as the number one over teaching.
Right.
It's to supplement some of the other piece of me that I'm wanting to drive. I have more that I want to give now that I'm finished with schooling. It's like, what do I do with these extra hours that I used to fill up with going to class or reading or writing? And for me, it's coaching right now. But I still have this solid idea of who I am in the classroom. And it took me a long time to figure it out.
Right. How long did that take you to get?
Oh, my gosh.
Last semester with COVID.
That's Malone time.
There is part of that. Because I coached for 12 years. And I think the entire time let me back up. 10 years of it was pretty much with the same coaching staff. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I was part of a team there. So I didn't have this feeling of being separated and having to be on my own. So I did the coaching, I was a team there, and then in my department, which is the history department at Jenks High School, has some issues, we'll say. But we're not really a team. So my identity was definitely with the soccer program. And then we had a changing coach that I didn't feel like part of the team, and it kind of broke that idea of I'm a coach to where now it was like, this is not where my heart is. I don't love this anymore. Yeah. And so I changed direction. So I'd say about 4 years ago, I really started to pour more into being a teacher, which is sad because I'm going through a Ph.D. program in education.
Yeah.
And the classroom was not where my heart was, but I think I changed at that point.
How awful was it for you when the coaching aspect, the sport, was removed from you? In a sense, right? Yeah. Like you couldn't see yourself there anymore. You removed yourself from that. How hard was that next year for you?
I think it's because I was at the same school. There was a lot of animosity because you see the people that you think have driven a wedge between you and your love, and you're seeing them daily. And it's like,
you're just pissed.
I really don't want to be here.
Yeah.
And so, again, I've become much more recluse. I'm in my classroom a lot. I don't go hang out with everyone.
Stay in your hole?
Yeah. And
right.
It was like a safety zone, but it was a place where I didn't have to see the people that made me angry. Mm-hmm. And I think it's easier to find peace and solace. And then Kody and I started working on a program, writing the International Scholars Program that we're now running. And that was basically the same time period. And so now it's like, oh, here's something I can put my heart into. We're behind closed doors. I don't have to see people and get a little passion back. And I've had opportunities like this last year. I got an offer to go coach outside of the district, and it's like, I don't want to leave. I have some part of my heart is still in this program. I don't want to leave yet. So,
well, what you just described is exactly what I went through. Mm-hmm. Kody got to see it because we were right next door to each other, but I removed myself from what I felt was a bad situation for me. I could not stay with that sport any longer. Mm-hmm. And that next year was the worst, one of the worst personally, but the best in the classroom.
Yeah.
Because all that effort that was poured into the sport had no outlet anymore. So it had to go somewhere, and it went right into my classroom and my kids. And so that setup, that year was really good. And it could be the kids. It could be the kids' situation, but I poured in a lot there, and the next year was even better. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up leaving Jenks to go, but I took that with me.
To save the world, though.
I had to save the world, yeah. So, but that was so hard. And you talked about your identity. Yeah. I felt like my identity, which was solely planted in the pot of being a coach, was taken away. Yeah. And
especially when you have former players, whatever, that come back and they're like, hey, coach. And you're like, it's not coach anymore.
Yeah.
But
You're
that's fine.
so mad.
Yeah, you want to throw
get
something
out of my
all the time.
classroom.
But
Yeah.
So it's interesting for me, listening to you all talk about this sort of dual identity between
Yeah.
coach and teacher. And I'm all about confounding gender stereotypes in my life and in my work. And so it's been really interesting over the time. The assumption is, because I identify as male, that I'm obviously a coach for something, right? And so you'd have students refer to you as coach, and you're like, it's Mr. Connor, now Dr. Connor.
Life coach.
Life coach. But it's just interesting that sort of expectation is there, at least in secondary education, that the only reason that you would be a male teacher was so that you could primarily coach, and then you kind of do this teaching thing sort of on the side. And so I enjoy kind of turning that on its head in terms of things. And so
there is a lot of truth to that action. I was actually just kind of thinking through this the other day.
honestly, not to interrupt you, but honestly, I didn't know why I was invited since I'm not a coach at all.
And the reason
Is like, my dad did not coach. I mean, he's for the 70s. He was kind of a unicorn,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
And he, went from bus driver, teacher, counselor, so all the way up to the superintendent. But he never coached. And I came in immediately. I was a coach, and that was my identity. And it took years for me to identify myself. Like, I get paid a lot of money to be a teacher. I get paid a little bit to be a coach. I need to honor that. But it took me getting kicked out.
yeah.
Like, not kicked out, but I chose to leave.
Separation.
To separate that, right? And that is when I kind of found, like, I had seen great teaching. I appreciated it. I loved it, but I had not done it myself until I got kicked out because of sports.